The automatic doors of JFK International Airport, Terminal 4, slid open with a soft hiss. The scent of freshly roasted coffee mingled with the cool air from the climate control system, wrapping around Andre Collins like a thin mist. Light poured through massive glass panels, spilling across the polished stone floor and reflecting each of his steps. At 44, tall and solidly built, Andre moved with the calm of a man long accustomed to being in places where people looked at him and silently wondered, what's he doing here? A navy polo shirt, dark jeans, soft leather shoes, the image of a businessman enjoying an easy Friday, not a mogul fresh from closing a $4.2 billion merger. The hum of the airport surrounded him, the roll of luggage wheels across tile, a child pleading for candy, the echo of boarding calls. A woman's voice came over the PA. Flight 447 to Los Angeles is now boarding first class and business class passengers. Andre glanced at his phone, scrolling past an email from the legal department. Contract documents awaited his signature in Los Angeles, the final piece that would give Collins Aviation Group, the company he'd built from a single leased aircraft 15 years ago, a 40% stake in Aero Meridian Airlines, one of North America's largest carriers. He walked toward the boarding area. The crowd split into two streams, a long line of economy passengers and a quieter lane for first class. Here, Italian leather suitcases, Swiss watches, and bespoke suits created the air of a private club, a space that seemed designed for those who had always belonged. As Andre approached, a woman in a white blazer swept past. Victoria Halstead, 39, with neatly styled golden hair and a Hermes bag dangling from her arm. Her gaze moved like she was taking inventory, each step infused with the confidence and entitlement of someone accustomed to power. At the gate, Naomi Brooks, a young gate agent with warm brown skin and an easy smile, scanned Andre's ticket. "Enjoy your flight, Mr. Collins. You're in seat 2A, left window. Perfect weather for flying today." Her greeting was a small patch of warmth in the rush of the terminal. Andre nodded. "Thank you, Naomi." But just a few steps later, the atmosphere shifted. The first-class cabin opened before him, cream leather seats, polished wood panels, the faint scent of champagne. He walked the aisle, eyes scanning for his seat. 2A. He stopped. Someone was in it. Victoria Halstead sat there, legs crossed, champagne flute in hand, eyes fixed on her phone as if she'd been there for hours. The overhead bin above was crammed with her Louis Vuitton luggage, spilling into the neighboring compartment. Andre checked his ticket again. Clear as day. 2A. Naomi had confirmed it. He stepped forward, voice warm but firm. "Excuse me, I believe this is my seat." Victoria looked up, slowly, as though he had interrupted a sacred ritual. Her blue eyes swept over him from head to toe. The polo shirt, the worn messenger bag, no diamond watch, no luxury logos. She smiled, but it was the smile of someone holding all the cards. "I'm sorry, but I don't think you belong in first class." The words landed like acid, sharp and cold, leaving an invisible burn. Andre felt his chest tighten, not with sudden anger, but with the familiar weariness of a refrain he'd heard in countless variations his whole life, from the playground to the boardroom. He held out his ticket, his hand steady as steel. "I have 2A. There must be some mistake." Victoria gave a soft, hollow laugh. "There's no mistake. I always fly first class. Maybe you should check back at the gate. Sometimes people get their tickets mixed up. The emphasis on mixed up carried a clear implication. People like you are often in the wrong place. Around them, the cabin's chatter thinned. A few curious eyes turned their way. The air began to thicken. Andre kept his thin smile. Then perhaps you wouldn't mind showing me your ticket. Victoria's fingers tightened around the champagne glass, her knuckles whitening. I don't have to prove anything. This is my seat, and I'm not giving it up to someone who clearly doesn't understand how first class works. The steady hum of the air vents seemed to deepen, as if the sound itself had been pulled inward. The unspoken script was one everyone knew. The black man would yield, move to another seat, and avoid disturbing the first-class experience. But Andre Collins hadn't built a multi-billion-dollar aviation empire by accepting only what others thought he was allowed to have. The click of high heels tapped lightly against the polished wood floor of the first-class cabin. Clara Jennings, the lead flight attendant, appeared beside Andre, her professional smile as precisely placed as if it had been programmed. But when her eyes swept over the scene before her, Victoria Halstead, sitting comfortably in 2A, and Andre standing with his ticket in hand, a flicker of cool detachment slipped through the polished exterior. "Is there a problem here?" Clara asked, her tone soft but carrying the weight of authority. Victoria was quicker to answer. "Yes, this man thinks my seat is his." The emphasis on "this man" landed like she was talking about an unremarkable stranger from Coach. Andre hadn't yet spoken when Clara turned to him with an assessing look. "Sir, may I see your boarding pass?" He handed it over. Clara took it, examining it as though verifying a high-value check. "Yes, it does say 2A. Her tone didn't suggest the matter was settled, but rather that she was working out a way to rearrange things. "Miss Halstead, may I see your boarding pass?" Victoria waved a dismissive hand. "I didn't bring it out here. I'm a Platinum Elite member with Aero Meridian. I always fly first class." Clara nodded, as if that were valid proof, then glanced toward Eric Wong, the secondary flight attendant standing nearby. "Eric, check with the gate to see if there's a seat duplication." While Eric walked away, Victoria took a sip of champagne, tilting her head with a smirk. "I'm sure this will be resolved quickly. Some people just don't understand the system." Andre heard every word, each one sharp as a blade. He remained upright, his gaze calm, but his mind was already laying out the steps like a high-stakes M&A negotiation. Verify, cross-check, block the escape route, close the deal. Eric returned, looking uneasy. "Ms. Clara, the system shows Mr. Collins is assigned to 2A. Mrs. Halstead is a frequent upgrade member." Victoria jumped in instantly. "Exactly. My status obviously takes priority. I already told you that." Clara turned back to Andre, her voice gentle but firm. "Sir, we do have an excellent seat in premium economy. Would you be willing to move there?" The cabin seemed to contract. Andre could feel the weight of every pair of eyes on him. This was the moment most people would nod and let it go. But not this time. He gave a slight smile. "I appreciate the offer, but I have a confirmed ticket for 2A. I'd like to sit in the seat I paid for." Eric bit his lip, and Clara's smile seemed to freeze in place. "Sir, we need to resolve this quickly so the flight can depart on time." Ms. Halstead was seated first. Andre's reply came evenly, his tone like tempered steel. The U.S. Department of Transportation, Title 14, CFR Part 250, requires the airline to honor the seat confirmed and paid for. Seated first is not a valid reason to change seat ownership. A soft gasp sounded from a row behind. Someone had begun filming on their phone. Victoria raised an eyebrow. "Are you trying to teach me the law?" Andre tilted his head slightly, his voice cutting clean. "No, I'm simply reminding you of the regulations your airline has committed to its passengers." The air thickened. Clara's expression shifted, but instead of ending the dispute, she said, "Sir, please provide additional identification. We just want to be sure." Andre felt it like a punch to the chest. Identification? After his ticket had already been scanned at the gate? In 3 decades of flying hundreds of first-class trips, he had never been asked this. "Additional ID," he repeated, his voice lower now, carrying a dangerous undertone. Eric stepped in, mumbling, "It's just procedure when there's a dispute." Andre pulled out his wallet and handed over his ID. Clara studied it, checking each detail against the ticket, even reading aloud. "Andrew Marcus Collins." But the ticket says Andre Collins. "Marcus is my middle name," Andre said evenly. "Andre is my professional name." Victoria leaned back in her seat, the corner of her mouth curling. "I don't mind if you sit there." She pointed toward the last seat in first class, right beside the lavatory. Clara looked over. "Would that be acceptable to you, sir?" Andre answered without hesitation. "I'll stay in 2A. Victoria leaned toward Clara, lowering her voice just enough for Andre to hear. "This is honestly a joke. Look at him. He doesn't even look like he can afford first class." The sound of it scraped through the cabin like metal on glass. Silence fell. An older black woman in row 4 let out a quiet, "Oh my God." Andre drew in a slow breath. In that moment, he knew exactly what he could do to end this, and when he did, no one here would ever be the same again. Andre stood there, his hand still holding the ID card Clara had just handed back to him. Every word Victoria had spoken still rang in his ears, like a hammer striking hot metal again and again. "Looks like you can't afford it." A sentence carrying the weight of a century of prejudice. Eric stepped forward, forcing a stiff smile. "Mr. Collins, perhaps the best way is for us to resolve this quickly, so the plane can depart on time." Andre tilted his head, his eyes fixed on Eric. On-time departure is important, but respecting a paying customer is more important. Or is Aero Meridian's policy to only prioritize passengers who look like first-class members? A few passengers let out dry, uneasy laughs. A middle-aged man in row 3 looked down to avoid Andre's gaze. Victoria rolled her eyes. "Come on, you're trying to turn a small issue into politics." Andre's mouth curved slightly. "Politics? No. This is a commercial contract, and I have a ticket, a legal contract, for seat 2A. You are violating the conditions of carriage, Section 3.1, on the right to occupy the purchased seat." Clara drew a deep breath, starting to feel the situation slipping out of her control. "Mr. Collins, if you don't cooperate, I'll have to involve security." Andre narrowed his eyes, his voice lowering but as sharp as a blade. "Good. But before that, call your superior out here. Someone with real decision-making authority." Eric and Clara exchanged glances. Such demands usually came from difficult passengers, but there was something different in Andre's tone. It was the voice of a senior attorney, citing contractual clauses rather than a customer arguing over a seat. Andre unlocked his phone, moving deliberately, making sure everyone could see. He dialed and lifted it to his ear. "Rachel, it's me. Patch in legal and start recording. We have an incident on Aero Meridian Flight 447 that needs immediate handling." A murmur rippled through her several rows. Victoria raised her eyebrows, though her mocking smile had thinned. "Who's Rachel?" Andre covered the microphone. "My chief of staff, and very soon you'll know exactly where I stand in the system you think I don't understand." Clara took a half step back, sensing danger now. "Mr. Collins, I think we can handle this internally." Andre cut her off, his voice now like a gavel striking in a boardroom. "No, Clara, you've had 20 minutes to handle it internally. Now it's time for strategic management intervention." He switched to a second line. "Connect me to Robert Hamilton. Yes, the CEO of Aero Meridian. Tell him this is Andre Collins, chairman of Collins Aviation Group, his largest shareholder." Eric's face drained of color. Clara tried to maintain composure, but her hands gripped the crew logbook tightly. Victoria let out a short laugh, clinging to her last shred of confidence. "You're joking, right? If you really were, then why dress like that?" Andre turned to her, his eyes like ice. "Because real power doesn't need a logo on a shirt or a suitcase plated in gold. But it's enough to ground this entire flight crew, if necessary." His phone beeped with the sound of a connection. A deep voice came through the line. "Andre, I just heard from Rachel." Andre enunciated each word clearly. "Robert, I'm on your flight 447. Your staff just asked me to prove I purchased my ticket, denied me my confirmed seat 2A, and prioritized another passenger based solely on appearance. I expect an immediate investigation." The cabin fell into absolute silence. Only the hum of the air system and the pounding of Victoria's heartbeat remained. "Understood," Robert said. "I'll have the flight grounded. Hold the line." Andre muted the microphone, looking around the cabin. "This flight isn't taking off. Not until everyone here understands that contracts, rights, and dignity cannot be erased by personal bias." A woman in row 4 began to clap softly. A few others raised their phones, this time to record the truth. Victoria turned to Clara, her voice urgent. "Do something. I can't believe you're letting him." Clara didn't answer. Eric had just received the emergency notification on his tablet. "Return to gate. Do not depart." His face went pale, while Andre simply sat down in his rightful seat 2A, fastened his seatbelt, and waited for the next storm. The soft ding from Eric's tablet sliced through the thick, stifling air like a knife. His eyes locked on the screen, then slowly lifted. His face had gone pale, his lips barely moving as he said, "We have been ordered to return to the gate. Immediately." Victoria shot halfway out of her seat, the champagne glass trembling in her hand. "What? Over a seat dispute? This is a joke, right?" Andre didn't answer. He simply adjusted his seatbelt, his posture steady as if he were the one piloting the aircraft. Clara looked around the cabin, struggling to reclaim control. "Ladies and gentlemen, we apologize for the inconvenience. The aircraft will be returning to the gate to resolve an internal matter." Her voice still carried the polished tone of a flight attendant, but the way her hand gripped the seat back betrayed her tension. From a few rows back, a young man's voice rang out. "Inconvenience? I'd say this is the right thing to do." His phone camera was aimed squarely at Victoria. She spun around, blue eyes flashing irritation. "He's ruined this flight, all to prove some kind of point." Andre lifted his head, his gaze calm but razor-sharp. "No, Miss Halstead. I'm not proving a point. I'm upholding the contract I signed when I purchased my ticket, and the principle of equal treatment that every customer is entitled to. You're the one who turned this into a test of prejudice." The aircraft began to decelerate, the engines humming lower. The faint squeal of the wheels could be heard as the plane turned back toward the taxiway. A few passengers began clapping, others silently kept filming. Andre's phone vibrated in his hand. He glanced at the screen. "Robert Hamilton." He switched it to speaker. Robert's voice came through, steady and direct. "Andre, I've instructed operations. This flight will remain at the gate until a preliminary investigation is complete. I've also asked the VP of Operations to call you immediately." Andre replied, "Thank you." "And Robert, I want the entirety of this incident documented in the airline's official report." Clara froze in place. The name Robert Hamilton, CEO of Aero Meridian, had just echoed through the cabin, unmistakable. She knew the power game had shifted, and she was on the weaker side. Before she could take a breath, Eric's tablet pinged again. He looked at it, muttered under his breath, "Oh, God," then raised his eyes. "The VP of Operations is on the line for you, Mr. Collins." Andre nodded as his phone rang again. He answered, and a brisk female voice spoke from the other end. "Mr. Collins, this is Patricia Green. I want to offer my deepest apologies on behalf of Aero Meridian. We are immediately suspending flight attendants Clara Jennings and Eric Wong, pending investigation, and passenger Victoria Halstead will be placed on the airline's permanent no-fly list." Victoria's eyes widened, her face draining of color. "What?" "You can't," Patricia continued. "Furthermore, the entire Aero Meridian flight crew will undergo mandatory training on identifying and eliminating bias. This directive comes directly from executive leadership." Andre glanced briefly at Victoria, then returned his attention to the call. "I agree with this course of action, and I'll ensure Collins Aviation Group directly oversees the process." "Yes, sir," Patricia replied. The call ended. The cabin felt as if all the air had been sucked out. Victoria collapsed back into 2A, Andre's seat, her eyes darting around in search of an ally, but finding only phone cameras recording her. The older black woman in row 4 spoke up, her voice low but firm. "Ms. Halstead, the only person who ruined this flight is you. He showed you his ticket from the start." A young man in row 5 added, "Lady, you literally tried to kick off a paying passenger because you didn't like how they looked. Everyone's got this on video now." Victoria's lips trembled as she looked around, but no one was on her side anymore. The plane rolled slowly toward the gate. The ding sounded again, signaling passengers would soon be instructed to disembark. Andre unfastened his seatbelt, stood, and retrieved his bag from the overhead bin, sitting neatly beside Victoria's overflowing Louis Vuitton. Placing it on the floor, he turned to Clara and Eric. "You've just lived through a real-time case study in brand risk when customer service is handled the wrong way. It's going to be taught in every customer service training program I fund this year." The words landed like the final nail, sealing the coffin of their careers. The final ding sounded. The cabin door opened, and a damp gust from the jet bridge swept in. Passengers rose from their seats, but no one hurried. They were still held in place by the aftershock of the confrontation they had just witnessed, a scene they knew would be headline news before the day was over. Andre Collins stepped out first. Each footfall on the carpeted jet bridge echoed like the slow, deliberate beat of a drum, heavy with the signal that this story was far from finished. Ahead, a group of ground staff and a man in a grey suit with an operations supervisor badge stood waiting. "Mr. Collins, the man began, but Andre raised a hand to cut him off. "Save the apology for the official report," he said, his voice steady and clear enough for several nearby passengers to hear. "And send that report to the legal department of Collins Aviation before 5 p.m. today. I want every detail documented verbatim." The man swallowed hard, nodding repeatedly. Behind them, Victoria Halstead was escorted by 2 airport security officers. Her Hermes bag dangled from her arm, her eyes unfocused in the crowd. Her steps were hurried, not because she wanted to leave quickly, but because she wanted to escape the dozens of phone cameras pointed at her. Clara Jennings and Eric Wong trailed last, their heads bowed. They knew every step they took was another frame in a video already being uploaded with captions like, "Flight attendants, suspended for discrimination." As Andre reached the terminal concourse, a few passengers who had witnessed everything approached him. A silver-haired man extended his hand. "Mr. Collins, thank you for not backing down. Not everyone could have done that." Andre shook his hand, nodding slightly. "This isn't just about me. If someone has a ticket and a right, they deserve the same respect as anyone else." A sharp notification ping came from Andre's phone. "Breaking news. Breaking Aero Meridian Flight 447 returns to gate over discrimination claims. Source: Collins Aviation Chairman on board." Below it, the share count was climbing by the second. He knew the media wave had already begun. As he stepped out past security, the midday New York sunlight swept across his face. Off to the side, a freelance reporter was waiting, recorder in hand. "Mr. Collins, do you have any comment on being treated like an invalid passenger by an airline you're a major shareholder of?" Andre paused for a beat, looking directly into the camera lens held by the reporter's partner. "If this happened to me, someone with the power to change it, then how many times has it happened to those without a voice? The real question isn't, why did they do this to me? But what will we do to make sure it doesn't happen to anyone else?" That answer, short but sharp, was like a spark thrown into a fuel tank. Within an hour, the clip was everywhere on Twitter, LinkedIn, and Facebook. The hashtag #seat began to spread, paired with personal stories of discrimination on airplanes, in hotels, and in restaurants. In the office on the 47th floor of Collins Aviation, Rachel Morgan took a call from a major investor. "If Collins plans to turn this into an industry-wide reform campaign, we'll double our funding." Meanwhile, At Aero Meridian headquarters, Robert Hamilton was in an emergency meeting with his PR team. With each passing second, their brand value was eroding under the flood of videos from Flight 447. Robert looked at his aide. "Find a way to make sure Collins knows we will act, not just apologize." Back at the airport, Andre sat in a small conference room hastily arranged by the VIP services team. Rachel was already connected via video, the screen showing both the legal and PR teams of Collins Aviation. "What's our move?" one lawyer asked. Andre looked straight into the camera. "Start with Aero Meridian. Demand mandatory company, wide training. Change the boarding policy so status can't blindly override a valid ticket, and establish a discrimination complaint hotline. If they agree, we support. If not, we sell our shares." The statement fell with the finality of a closed deal. Rachel nodded. "And the media?" Andre's lips curved into a faint smile. "We don't run a campaign. We let the story tell itself. I saw the eyes of the people recording in that cabin. They'll do that work for us." Outside, the airport PA called another flight. Andre glanced out the window, spotting an Aero Meridian Boeing 787 taxiing toward the runway. He knew that within days, these very aircraft would carry a new rule, not one forced by a PR stunt, but by an uncompromising principle. Respecting the customer is a non-negotiable condition for survival. He stood, straightening the collar of his polo. "Rachel, clear my schedule. Next week, I want to meet with Aero Meridian's executive team, not to hear an apology, but to hear their plan to fix this." And as Andre left the room, his footsteps on the tile floor sounded like the drumbeats of a new battle about to begin. 4 days after the Flight 447 incident, the main conference room on the 50th floor of Collins Aviation's Chicago headquarters was lit from 6 a.m. Morning sunlight poured through the massive glass windows, reflecting off the long conference table where 14 black leather chairs were already filled. On the large screen, a digital map showed the operational status of Aero Meridian's entire fleet, and in the upper right corner, a plunging graph of customer satisfaction scores following the incident. Andre Collins stood at the head of the table, one hand in his pocket, eyes fixed on the screen. 32 million views on Twitter, 19 million on TikTok, and the hashtag #SeatUA is now in the global top 5, he said evenly. "This isn't just a viral story. It's a public indictment." Rachel Morgan, his chief of staff, flipped through a thick stack of documents. "Mr. Mert, Hamilton has agreed to all 3 of our demands: anti-bias training, changes to the boarding process, and a dedicated discrimination complaint hotline. They want Collins Aviation to help design the program." Andre gave a slight nod. "We'll do it, but let's be clear, this isn't charity work. This is brand risk management. Every airline in our investment portfolio will adopt the same measures." One board member asked, "How do you think other airlines will react?" Andre turned, his gaze sweeping the room. "The dominoes have started to fall. After Aero Meridian, another airline will be named. And they'll come to us, not because they love the equality message, but because they fear the cost of another Seat 2A incident." The room fell silent for a moment. Everyone understood. What happened on Flight 447 had become a legal precedent, a living case study in the financial damage caused by discrimination. That afternoon, Andre flew to Dallas to attend an aviation industry conference. He wore a navy suit and a charcoal silk tie, no trace of the low-profile look he had on during Flight 447. The media already knew he would be there, and dozens of reporters waited in the lobby. A CNN reporter raised a microphone. "Mr. Collins, do you believe the Flight 447 incident was an isolated case or a systemic problem?" Andre answered without hesitation. "When something can happen anywhere, to anyone, it's a systemic problem, and the system needs to change." A Financial Times journalist pressed, "Some say you're using this incident to increase Collins Aviation's economic leverage." Andre gave a half smile. "They're right. Economic power is a tool, and a tool can be used to maximize profit or to maximize fairness. I choose both." Backstage, Robert Hamilton, CEO of Aero Meridian, approached Andre. His expression was a mix of gratitude and unease. "Andre," Robert said quietly, "my company owes you a thank you and a warning for the entire industry." Andre shook his hand, his grip a little firmer than courtesy required. "Robert, I'm not warning anyone. I'm showing them a scenario, and they can decide whether they want to avoid it or face it." Robert exhaled. "I've had dozens of calls from other airline CEOs asking about your training program. You've just accidentally created a new standard." Andre's voice was low but certain. "Not by accident." 3 days later in San Francisco, the CEO of a mid-sized airline announced a no-status override policy, banning seat reassignment based on membership tier when a ticketed seat was already confirmed. Another carrier in Europe declared a partnership with Collins Aviation to train its staff. The media began calling it the Seat 2A effect, a term that started appearing in risk management consultancy reports. That evening, Andre returned to his Chicago apartment. The city lights shimmered, reflecting off the dark green-blue river. Rachel called via video from the office. "You need to see this." She turned her laptop toward the camera. A group of black aviation students at Northfield Flight School holding a sign that read, "We deserve seat 2A2" during a seminar. Behind them, a slide projected Andre's face from a press photo taken at the Dallas conference. Andre looked for a few moments, then nodded. "This is the part I can't control, and don't want to. When the story no longer belongs to you, that's when it truly has power." He closed the laptop and stepped out onto the balcony. The night wind was strong, carrying the sound of distant train horns and the hum of the city. In his mind, a new plan was already forming, not just for the airline industry, but for the entire customer service sector Collins Aviation could influence. But before taking action, he allowed himself a moment with his eyes closed. Flight 447 had opened a door. The question now was how far he would step through, and how many people he would bring with him. 3 weeks after the Dallas conference, Collins Aviation's headquarters had transformed into a command center for a campaign unlike anything they had ever run. On the massive digital board in the strategy room, a world map glowed with dozens of red dots, each one representing a service company reaching out to request Andre's Seat 2A consulting package. And it wasn't just airlines. A 5-star hotel in Dubai wanted to adopt anti-bias protocols for guest check-ins. A chain of fine dining restaurants in Paris requested training for its service teams. Even a shipping conglomerate in Singapore asked Andre to train its entire frontline workforce. Rachel Morgan placed a thick stack of folders on his desk. We're looking at an opportunity worth at least $480 million over the next 2 years. But you have to decide. Keep it within aviation, or expand to the entire service industry. Andre leaned back in his chair, thoughtful. Seat 2A started in a first-class cabin. But bias doesn't stop at the aircraft door. His tone hardened. We expand. The news spread quickly. Within the week, Andre accepted an invitation to speak at a global customer experience forum in Zurich. Traditionally focused on technology and consumer trends, this year they had added a hot new topic: economic power in the fight against bias. The Zurich auditorium glowed under golden lights as hundreds of executives from around the world listened intently. Andre stood center stage, dressed in a black suit, white shirt, no tie, an image of both authority and approachability. That day, on Flight 447, he began. I wasn't just defending my seat. I was defending the principle that rights cannot be reassigned based on someone else's subjective judgment. He paused, letting the sounds of scribbling pens and clicking keyboards fill the room. Aviation was just the starting point. But if a hotel receptionist sizes you up before deciding whether to hand you a room key, if a restaurant host chooses your table based on your clothes, then we're still living through another Flight 447, just in a different location. Applause broke out across the hall. Andre continued, We are going to apply the Seat 2A protocol to every sector in customer service, from aviation and hospitality to transportation and retail. Every interaction will be measured against one metric: the compliance rate with the anti-bias principle. But in the middle of the excitement, an unexpected name flashed on Rachel's phone. Clara Jennings. Rachel hesitated, but Andre nodded. Put it through. Clara's voice was different now. Gone was the false confidence of before, replaced with humility and a trace of fatigue. Mr. Collins, I know I have no right to ask for anything, but I just completed a multicultural training program, and I want to help you expand this initiative. I was on the wrong side, and I want to make it right. Andre was silent for a few seconds. Clara, you understand, your involvement will be scrutinized. People will ask why I'm partnering with the person who became the most notorious example of the problem. I know, Clara said. But if the goal is to change mindsets, then my story can be a tool. I used to think I was being fair, until I was exposed in front of 43 people and millions of views. Andre rested his hand on the table, his gaze distant. It was a risk, but also a powerful psychological move. All right, you'll join the advisory team. But remember, not to erase the past, but to prove that people can change. The following month, the Seat 2A protocol launched in 3 pilot markets: an airline in South Africa, a hotel chain in Switzerland, and an Asian shipping company. Clara stood beside Andre at the press conference, openly recounting her mistakes to dozens of reporters. The story made waves. A major newspaper ran the headline, "From first class to a global campaign, Suspended Flight Attendant Co. founds anti-bias program." Rachel sent Andre a short text. This is the twist no one saw coming. Andre smiled. He knew that when those who once stood on the wrong side became part of the solution, the message would carry farther than any speech could. Just 3 months after the Seat 2A protocol was rolled out at the Swiss hotel chain, a 57-second video unexpectedly went viral. In the clip, a young Indian couple stood at the front desk of the Grand Helvetia Hotel, being refused check, in on the grounds of no valid booking confirmation, despite showing both their confirmation email and reservation code. The employee, neatly dressed in a tailored suit and speaking in a rigid tone, eventually delivered the line that set public outrage ablaze. "We have standards for executive room guests." The problem? Grand Helvetia was one of the 3 pilot markets for the Seat 2A protocol. The program's logo was clearly displayed on the advertising board behind the reception desk, turning the incident into a direct blow to Andre's credibility. In Chicago, inside the emergency meeting room of Collins Aviation and Partners, Rachel played the clip on the big screen. With every passing second, Andre's expression grew darker. "We trained their entire staff 3 months ago," Rachel said. "Your signature is still on their completion certificate." Andre folded his arms, his voice low, but carrying force. "This isn't just a training failure. This is proof that some people will only perform when they know they're being watched, then slip back into old habits the moment no one's looking." Clara, now an official advisor, spoke up. "If we don't respond hard, people will say, 'Seat 2A is just a PR stunt.'" Andre turned to her, his eyes like blades. "Then we respond at a level no one's ever seen." Less than 12 hours later, Andre landed in Zurich. At the Grand Helvetia, Klaus Weber, CEO of the parent company that owned the hotel chain, greeted him in the top-floor boardroom. Morning light poured through massive glass panels, reflecting off the walnut conference table. Klaus began with a long apology, but Andre cut him off. "I didn't come here for apologies. I came to decide whether Grand Helvetia still deserves to display the Seat 2A logo." Klaus froze for a moment. "Mr. Collins, please give us a chance." "The chance was when you signed the agreement to fully implement our protocols," Andre said, placing a printed copy of the contract on the table. Clause 5.2. Any discriminatory act occurring after completion of training will result in the immediate revocation of the Seat 2A brand license and a global press release. Klaus swallowed hard. "If you do this, we'll lose millions in booked reservations." Andre leaned forward. "No, you'll lose trust, and that's the one thing you can't buy back." The meeting ended with an unprecedented decision. Collins Aviation and Partners would publicly revoke Grand Helvetia's Seat 2A certification, accompanied by a press release emphasizing, "The program does not shield anyone, not even our largest clients." The release went out with the video attached, and within hours, global media exploded. A Swiss newspaper splashed the headline, "Andre Collins cuts multi-million, contract over 57 seconds of bias." Clara appeared on CNN, stating plainly, "When I made my mistake on Flight 447, Mr. Collins didn't compromise. Today, he proved that principle has no exceptions." But the move was more than just a crisis response. It triggered a reverse effect. A wave of luxury hotel and service brands reached out to Collins Aviation and Partners, requesting audits of their processes before they became the next victims of the Helvetia effect. Rachel summed it up in the weekly report. Consulting requests are up 230% since the incident, and the hashtag @NoExceptions is starting to replace hashed Seat 2A on social media. Andre read the report and smiled faintly. Good. That's how you turn a storm into a jet engine. That evening, back in his Zurich hotel room, Andre stood by the window, looking down at the warm yellow lights stretching along the old city streets. His phone rang. Robert Hamilton from Aero Meridian. Andre, I just saw the news. You've set a new standard. No CEO in the industry has ever cut a major contract over a single incident. Andre replied simply, Robert, a principle is only worth something if you're willing to pay for it. There was a pause on the other end. Then Robert said, I think you've just turned Seat 2A into something far bigger than aviation. Andre looked out into the night, knowing Robert was right. Flight 447 had opened the door, but the Helvetia incident proved this was no longer the story of one airline, one industry, or one first-class seat. This was the story of every seat, every reception desk, every point of contact between human and human. And Andre had no intention of stopping. 6 months after the grand Helvetia incident, the Seat 2A protocol had become a name everyone recognized. But along with its growing reputation, Andre Collins began to feel the crushing pressure from forces he knew would be difficult to confront. On a Monday morning, in the conference room on the 52nd floor in Chicago, Rachel Morgan placed a thick red folder in front of him, thicker than any contract. Andre, this is an official warning letter from the Global Service Alliance. They're demanding we suspend all evaluation and certification revocations in the hotel sector unless approved by an independent council they control. Andre flipped through a few pages, immediately recognizing the names on the council. All CEOs of major hotel conglomerates who saw Seat 2A as a direct threat to their power and profits. This is a lock, Rachel said. If you agree, Seat 2A loses its independence. If you refuse, they could ban the program from operating in hundreds of hotels in their network. That afternoon, Andre received an unexpected call from Senator Grant, a man with significant influence in transportation and tourism. His voice was deep, cold. Andre, I know you mean well. But if you keep exposing big brands the way you did with Helvetia, you're going to destabilize the service economy. I suggest you voluntarily scale back. Andre answered, each word hitting like a hammer on the table. Senator, instability doesn't come from us demanding fairness. It comes from fairness never existing in the first place. There was a long pause before Grant hung up. That evening, Andre called an emergency meeting. Clara Jennings, now the public face of the program, was present. We're at a crossroads, Andre said, his voice sharp as a blade. If we give in, Seat 2A becomes a decorative sticker, easy to abuse and meaningless. If we stay independent, we risk being shut out of the largest market. Clara leaned forward. If your goal is real change, you can't let someone else control your switch. I know the cost of defending a principle. I lost my old career because of it. But I also know, if you lose the principle, there's nothing left to protect. Rachel interjected. The problem is, if we're cut from that hotel network, consulting revenue will drop 40%. Investors will pull out. Andre stood, walking to the glass wall that overlooked the city lights. In the reflection, he saw both the man who had once silently endured an insult in Seat 2A and the man he was now, holding the power to change the rules of the game. "We won't back down," he said finally, "but we'll strike where they don't expect." 3 weeks later, Andre launched a global report. The Service Fairness Index, a transparent ranking that publicly measured how well service brands in over 50 countries adhered to Seat 2A principles. The report not only named the brands that excelled, but also openly listed those that violated the standards, complete with videos, complaint data, and internal penalty scores. The media erupted. A European newspaper ran the headline, "Seat 2A publishes fairness rankings. A shock to the luxury service industry." Brands that scored low faced immediate backlash from customers, falling stock prices, and pressure from their own shareholders. Meanwhile, the Global Service Alliance held an emergency meeting to plot a counterattack. But before they could act, several major brands, including a few council members, reached out to Collins Aviation and Partners, seeking to improve their scores for next year's report. Rachel sent a short text to Andre. "They wanted to play a power game. You just rewrote the rules." Andre replied simply, "Principles aren't negotiable. If you want in, follow the rules. If not, face the market consequences." That night, alone on the balcony of his Chicago apartment, Andre looked out at the glowing city. He knew what lay ahead would be even harsher, as Seat 2A began to touch the forbidden zones where profit and prejudice fused into an almost untouchable stronghold. But he also knew that if he took even one step back, everything that had happened since Flight 447 would be meaningless. The night wind swept past, carrying the distant sound of a train horn. Andre gripped the railing tighter and whispered, like a vow, "Principles have no price." 9 months after the release of the Service Fairness Index, an unprecedented event occurred. The Seat 2A protocol was brought before the International Economic Court in The Hague. The plaintiff, Aurelius Global Hotel Group, a 200-year-old empire with nearly 1,200 properties worldwide and a market capitalization of over $80 billion USD. They accused Seat 2A of causing severe economic losses through unsubstantiated reporting and damaging the brand's reputation, accompanied by a claim for $2.3 billion USD in damages. In the conference room on the 54th floor in Chicago, Rachel Morgan read each line of the complaint, her voice tight as a drawn wire. "Andre, they're going to turn this into a globally televised trial. The press, television, social media, all will become their courtroom. If we lose, Seat 2A will not only lose credibility, but could be bankrupted." Clara Jennings gripped the file tightly. "But if we win, this will be a precedent, protecting the right to publish independent evaluations for all service industries." Andre was silent for a long time. He knew this was the biggest gamble since Flight 447. It wasn't just about defending a program, but defending the principle that the truth could be spoken without being strangled by power and money. On the first day of trial, the courtroom in The Hague was packed. Television cameras from 32 countries focused on the defense table, where Andre sat between Rachel and a team of international lawyers. Representing the plaintiff, Aurelius CEO Madeleine Duval opened with a dramatic speech, accusing Seat 2A of lack of due diligence, distorting information, and making judgments based on isolated incidents, causing hundreds of millions in lost revenue. When it was his turn, Andre stood without notes, his voice carried across the room. Seat 2A did not cause the damage. We simply shone light on what they wanted kept in the dark. If the light cost them money, the problem is not the light. A murmur rippled through the courtroom. The trial lasted 4 days, with numerous witnesses, including customers who had been denied service at Aurelius hotels despite having valid confirmations. Videos of these incidents played in court, front desk clerks frowning, clipped words, and eyes scanning guests from head to toe. The plaintiff tried to counter with customer satisfaction statistics, but Andre's team presented hundreds of unresolved complaints, along with leaked internal emails showing management had deliberately filtered reports before release. On the 5th day, Seat 2A's lead counsel delivered the final blow. A clause in the cooperation contract between Aurelius and Seat 2A, Clause 4.3, allowing immediate revocation of certification if discriminatory conduct is documented with verified evidence. The evidence: 20/7 videos, 112 witness statements, and an independent report from the United Nations Human Rights Office. Cameras cut to Madeleine Duval, her face pale. That afternoon, the court ruled Seat 2A won. The judgment affirmed the right of independent evaluation organizations to publish transparent information for the public good, even if that information caused economic harm to the companies named. Outside the court, hundreds of journalists surrounded Andre. A BBC reporter asked, "Mr. Collins, how do you feel after winning a $2.3 billion lawsuit?" Andre smiled wearily, but his eyes were sharp. No one wins when fairness has to go to court to defend itself, but today, at least we preserved the right to tell the truth without asking permission. That night, in his hotel in The Hague, Andre sat alone by the window, looking out at the central square. His phone buzzed, a message from Rachel. "The news of the verdict is #1 worldwide, and the hashtag #truthhasnoprice is exploding." Andre typed back, "Tomorrow we start again. This can't just be a moment of victory. It has to be the start of a new standard." He set the phone down, took a sip of black coffee, and knew with certainty, after everything, what kept Seat 2A alive was not the win against Aurelius, but the daily commitment to living by the words he had said from the very beginning: principles have no price. From the first-class cabin of Flight 447 to the chambers of an international court, Andre Collins has proven that fairness is not a privilege, it is a default right. Real change does not come only from moments that make headlines, but from the small choices made every day at the hotel front desk, in an airplane cabin, or anywhere prejudice might appear. If you believe that principles cannot be bought, hit like, subscribe, and comment no price, because fairness has no price.